Okay, good evening, everyone.
You need a mic, honey. Kathy, you need a mic. Right there, pull it toward you, because you know you're going to talk. You know you are.
This way we can listen to her while she talks.
While I'm breathing?
Yeah.
Okay.
Okay, well, speaking of breathing, I'm just going to give everyone the heads up notice. Yes, I do have a bit of a cold. Yes, I'm coughing. Yes, my eyes are watering. It's not because I'm crying over the budget. So if you see any of that, please ignore it. On the tape, please understand, okay? So there you go. Okay, what we're going to do today, this is draft 3. For anybody who was at the community forum, you saw some of this already. A lot of it's going to look familiar. We have updated it to show real world where we're at today. So if you were at the community forum, this is not just a repeat. There is a lot of new stuff in here as well, okay? So I just think it's good to put us all on the same page as we get into the budget discussion tonight. Okay, and some of this I'll go over quickly because we did talk a little bit on Saturday, and everyone is the handouts that we had sent anyway. Okay, so for the governor's impact, where we started the budget with revenues being just shy of $1 million from the state. So $921,755. So in other words, had we been fully funded by the state, our job would be a lot easier this year if we had all of our revenues. We don't, okay. And again, revenue projections are at best inaccurate projections. And they're based primarily on state funding and tax revenues. There's some other sources in there as well, but those are the two main sources. Tax levy projections, which are the taxes, what the taxpayers pay, again, are based on estimates, and we'll talk about the tax cap in a little bit. So one of the things that was asked is for us to know where we're going. We really have to see where we've been, and we have to forecast out to say what's going to happen over the next couple of years. So what we did is we took a look out, and if you take a look at the graph, you're going to see that the spending is going up, and really what's important here to notice is this chart versus the next chart. This chart shows the spending going up versus the next chart, which shows revenues going up, but you can see it's not as steep as a climb as the spending. So the spending is going up faster than the money that we actually bring in, okay? Now, if we look at the deficit trend, what that really means is the graph where it says deficit trend, our deficit keeps growing. So 16, 17, what we're actually looking at for this year, moving all the way out to 2021, okay? And as we see, it's not going in the way that we want it to actually go. The next page, long-term financial deficit, I do want to spend a minute on this because there's a lot of information on this sheet. The first thing that I want to point out, and yes, this is in black and white, not in color, I understand. We're trying to conserve here, but the first line, which is in red, up here, if you take a look, this is our deficit amount, okay? And the deficit amount, just plain and simple, is our spending versus what we plan to bring in. So if you take a look for 16-17, you'll see our projected spending under the model was $27,869. Our projected revenues was $26,275, leaving a deficit of $1,594. And you see it working out throughout the years, and you see the deficit grows. And that's doing nothing different, changing nothing, not adjusting staff, nothing else, just plain and simple, that's where it would grow.
I have a question.
Yes.
Projected tax increase, is that, I mean, last year it was 2.21, right? And this year it's
0.93. Yep.
So what did you just split the difference, or?
Nope. Projected tax increase. Well, you're talking below. So you're talking down here?
Yeah.
That's what I'm getting to right now. But I want to go back up to this line with the deficit. And what was in the red? Additional real property taxes required or fund balance reserve use. So to make up these deficits, we either A, have to ask more from taxpayers in this amount, or B, use our fund balance and reserves. And the point of bringing that out, when you see it goes from 1.6 to 2.5 to 3.5 and so on and so forth, is at some point, if we run out of reserves, let's take a look at 2020-21, the taxpayers would not be able to foot an additional $6 million. There's just no way.
I understand that.
And Paul, to answer your question down below, when we look at the tax increase, this is really looking at what our taxpayers pay. So you see the 11,363 and the 2,334. For next year, at the 0.93% tax cap for 16-17, Our tax cap can go to 13,697. It's $126,000 more than this year at 0.93. That's it, 126. Doesn't quite make up to 1.5.
Well, I understand that.
But-
I get, but
Yep.
that's what, I'm just asking about the projection for the tax increase. It could be different each year.
It
Yes.
could.
Yes.
Now, you know me, I'm conservative. You already know this. So if you take a look in this model,
I see.
I've used .93. Now, that can change. It could go negative, it could go positive.
Right.
There are a lot of districts negative, so I just don't know where that's going to go, so.
It depends on the formula and how we fall and all the rest.
What I
Correct.
would suggest, though, is that if we find next year that the CPI is what it was this year or close to it, this year there are 6% of the school districts, so 10 school districts that are doing an override on the tax cap. I would suggest to you that that number will go much higher next year. People are kind of iffy and leery to do it because they've almost all failed. And it's expensive to have a fail one, and then just to put it back up again. So most people won't go for it if they're not sure that the community would pass it. But I would suggest to you that if the tax cap stays what it is, less than 1% for next year, that that number of people or districts that are going for an override will increase.
I think it would have to.
I do too. I don't know how anybody can plan on doing that.
And I think that, we have to have a lot of conversation about that, but maybe sometimes we need to look at, if we're doing it within a modest range instead of trying to go
Explode.
for the ring, just, because the governor's already sold this as a 2% tax
Yeah.
cap. So if we had went off with 2 or a little over 2 and tried to sell it to the community, I don't think it would have been a big sell because everybody believes, because there's so much in the media that it's a 2%, when really it can be anywhere from 2% or a little over 2% or even majorly over 2% for some districts to under 0.
Yeah. Tom, can you?
Yeah, there's some negative. 1%, that's basically was 1%, so that was 126,000.
Maybe 130.
Well, I can tell you right now, if you look at the figures, so let me go back to that, let me read it. So 13,679, 1% would have been $136,000.
Okay, so you can take a look at this and you could say if you increased it by
One more percent, it's another
1%, how much
136,000.
extra?
It
In
would
the
be
fol-
136,000.
It would be,
The following year would be about 138, the following year about 139.
Yeah, a little more.
right.
Okay, so that 1% of an increase. So if the board next year decided that they wanted to override that and shoot for over 60% or more, you would say that it's a 1.93, and you'd know how much more you would approximately be getting.
Now, that's 60% of the voters that came or of the registered voters?
The
No,
voters that
the
came.
voters that came.
Okay.
The one thing you do have to just be careful of if you want to go to 2%, if you go negative next year, if it goes to a -5, which some districts are, but if it's that low, if it's a -5, then what you would want to say is, because you have to publish what the tax cap
Cap should
was,
be, yeah.
and they're going to see a -5 versus a 2, so you have to just factor that in when you're looking at it.
That it wouldn't be a true 2%, because then it would be 2.5%.
Well, but now they're going to say, oh, it's a 7% difference from what they're allowed. Now they're asking for a 7% differential.
So with the exception of last year, and I can send this to Tom to send out to the BAT, we have the figures each year of the yays and nays on the votes. With the exception of last year, they were around 63, 64, which is pretty close. Last year, the community was incredibly supportive of our district, and they were higher for the first time that we could see in many, many years. That was a vote of confidence, and the numbers kept increasing as we went up in all of our propositions. So it'll be interesting to see what the community is doing this year
This year.
with it. We went out for a referendum on the capital project, so we already know that there's a projected tax increase just because of the capital project. So there's probably some families in this community who are thrilled this is a .93 and not a 2.2, right? Next year, they might have had an opportunity to breathe a little bit too. It's a possibility.
Well, I think a lot of times what happens is the anticipation is worse than the actual fact.
Oh, yeah.
And when there's small pieces like this increase, when we've talked about this before, some people don't even notice it because they have it escrowed. And, it's spread over 12 months for their mortgage payments. So when we're talking a $20 increase, then
They
when you
don't
split
feel
that
as
up
much.
over the several months, they hardly notice that increase in the payment when it's readjusted on their escrow once a
The
year.
equalization rates this year kicked Boston, that we know. Is
It
there any
hel-
way
it
for us
helps
to
the
get
town
that
of
ahead
Eden.
time?
We won't find that to the summer. We don't get that to the summertime.
So we have no idea.
Nope.
It could happen to any district, any
It
year.
could. It could. And really what you look at is last time they did a reassessment. The longer it takes to do a reassessment, the more likely your equalization rate will change.
And Boston hasn't.
It's been a while for Boston.
Well, most districts, it's been a while because they're afraid of doing that.
But it definitely helped the town of Eden.
You don't
th-
want to go
this
for
year.
re-election.
So when's Petra Carlo up, not gonna run again?
Just when you don't want to run again, that's when the town does
There you
it.
go.
Yeah.
Okay, so moving on. The next slide is showing really when we reach the cliff and we run out of reserves. So if you take a look, that really comes during the 2020 school year. And that's actually where all reserves are gone. Now, I need to point out, this is assuming, and there's a couple things I want to show on the slide. This is assuming you can use every dollar from every reserve, which you can't, but that's assuming if you did. The other thing to point out, where you see for the $8,449,000, 2 million of that, or 1.9, is in a capital reserve. You can't use that
Definitely can't touch
1.9 in to shore up your deficit. Yes.
And is that showing any contributing to the reserves at the end of each
Yes.
fiscal year?
Actually, no, because you cannot guarantee where you're going to end a year, so you cannot predict what you're going to be able to put in.
So this is a...
It's a worst-case scenario. It's a model.
This is a number if we don't put anything else into reserves.
Correct.
And burn through the reserves.
It's a
But
worst-case
it-
scenario
It's
model.
not if we put in, like we do each year, a little bit.
But I would say this, if you take a look for the next 3 years, if you put less than $1 million in the reserves for the next 3 years,
Yeah.
you're still going to end up without any reserves in
Maybe one more
1920.
year.
Well, no, in 1920, you still would end up without reserves. Instead of being $4.6 million in the hole, you might be $1 million in the hole.
Oh, okay.
You're still going to be in the hole even with putting back
Because of
in.
the
The
large
states put you in
deficit.
such a position
Correct.
that you can't make
Correct.
it up.
Because of the
matter what
large
you do.
deficit projected in that year, which is
In
over
each year.
5 million years.
Yep. Our deficit grows from 3 million to 4 million to 5 million, so
yep,
even
yep.
if you're putting in, you're still going to have that happen. It'll be less than
Other
that.
than petroleum, everything is going up more than 0.93%. I think that's a fair statement.
So even with that, in 1920, you have no reserves left.
Okay.
Okay. Taking a look, this is just another way of looking at it, of use of fund balance and reserves. It's the same thing that we saw on the first chart, which showed what the deficit is. Now let's look at the real world. That was the model. What you're going to notice in here, and I really want to point out, if you take a look at the 2 pages, this one versus the model, we're actually a little bit more in debt now going forward than we were under the model, just slightly. And the biggest reason why is while our revenues are pretty much the same as what we had in the model, our spending, our revenues are lower. We had predicted last year that our revenues would be higher this current year. We predicted the revenues would be higher. We're not going to meet the revenues. So when we're doing the budget this year, I'm not going to keep predicting that our revenues are going to be higher than what we're actually going to get in. So now you're seeing the revenue.
Don't try to convince him either,
Well,
because he's not.
we end up a couple.
You were trying to be positive for the
We were.
last year.
We definitely were. But now that's going to end up at the end of the year, it's going to come back and say, okay, now you didn't make what you thought you'd make in revenues, and so we're really spending less to try and make up
So
for
there
that.
won't be as much
basically.
to roll.
We already know there won't be as much to roll as previous years.
Right, but as long as we're ending on the positive side, even
Correct.
though we over-projected the revenues.
You're
we're
right.
not.
We're not in the state legal territory of being negative, yes. And I don't think we will be negative. We won't be negative.
Right.
We're not going to be. But looking at this budget cycle, we put in the budget of what we actually expect, 26,053. So it is lower than what that model was showing of 26,275. But based on that, really what you're seeing, it doesn't change much, because when you take a look at this graph here, still the year that the reserves run out is 1920. The debt's a little more. The deficit's a little more. It's 4.7 as opposed to, what was it, 4.5 or 4.6, but when you're at that point, it's, pretty close. Oh, it's 4.6 in the 1920 year, and now it's 4.79.
So let's just to lay it out there as a presumption, we're not a district that is currently considered by the comptroller to be in fiscal stress.
No,
So
within
if
2 years
So
in this model.
currently,
Currently, you're right.
there
Nope.
are districts that are in stress.
Yes.
What does theirs look like?
No one really shares a 5-year model, so I don't know what theirs look like. I would presume worse than ours.
So theirs would look like the last 2 years of ours.
It has to be worse than
Sooner.
ours if we're not on the list and they are on the
Yeah,
list.
correct. I mean, it's,
And that's the conversation that Jen's had, right? Yep. That's the email that she sent out to the teachers that she shared with you of, this is not just here.
it's not just here. For any district that's in fiscal stress or not, even those who are in good position, and right now, we are in good position, which is why I was advocating not using our reserves. I want us to remain in good position and not have no reserves. But right now, we're in good position. Even districts in good position, when you look at their long-range models,
Are going to be in fiscal stress.
same thing, correct,
Is it-
unless you alter it.
Isn't it fair to say, though, that even if you're not a district labeled in fiscal stress, you could still be experiencing
We are experiencing.
internal stress without being
Oh,
labeled?
yes, without being labeled that way, absolutely.
Anytime you're in a deficit, and we've been in a deficit for years, you're in fiscal stress.
I mean,
We're
it
not
gives a false
labeled
sense of
We're not
security
labeled.
if you don't
Yes.
have the
Correct.
label.
That's very true. We have been in a deficit model for years, and the deficit, as you see, is growing, so every year we make tough decisions, and the whole point is, you try and keep pushing out that year that the reserves aren't there. You keep trying. You don't want to be 1920. If you can, next year, push it out to 2021, and the year after, push it out to 22, 23. But again, that's making adjustments each and every year. Then you can see, okay, now making those adjustments, where does it get you?
It's like doing a budget at home, but there's a light at the tunnel, at the end of the tunnel, usually there, where there is no light at the end of this tunnel.
Well, it's a light, but it's a train.
That's what I was just thinking. I
That's
mean,
so
basically,
true, yeah.
you know, everything we try and do is undone by, you know,
I hate to be a gloomy Gus, because it is not something, here, David, here's your presentation. I hate to be gloomy Gus, because this part here is not any fun to show as much as it is to hear, and there is not good news we're actually showing here. The good news I would take away from this is this is reversible. We don't have to actually go here. This
we
is like a
can't do
Christmas
it,
carol.
though. We can't do it ourselves. We need the states, like Jen's saying, we need the states.
Partially. If we lower our spending at some point, well,
How? I mean, I don't know if
you're
you've lost
trying to
sleep
get
about
blood
it,
from
but
a
I
stone
have.
at
it is
this
blood from a
point.
stone.
I mean, it
At
just-
some point, and this makes me very unpopular, at some point, you have, with a declining enrollment, at some point, you need to look at staffing. And whether it's this year or not, at some point, you have to.
Right, I understand that, but I mean, we've looked, you know, we still need the state's help.
Oh, absolutely. Oh, I don't want to let them off the hook. We need their help big time.
Now, there is some articles and some of the stuff I've read that said the foundation aid that they're looking at.
Yep.
What are you hearing about that? Are they going to do any increase in that?
What I'm hearing, and it's in the presentation, I'm hearing that we will get the GEA back. We're counting on that.
Yeah, we
We are
already factored
budgeting
that
for
in.
that. And I'm also hoping, and Mike, you'll be happy, even with my conservative self, I put an increase in foundation aid, and even that's tenuous, but I still put it in. And you'll see that, and
Yeah.
I'll show you guys that, okay? So I'm hoping we get more foundation
And is
aid.
that what you're hearing out there?
Well, Senator Gallivan told the three of us that GEA, again, we're hearing from all sides, looks like it should happen. I'm not seeing a lot
The
that it
GA will
won't
go away.
this year.
The foundation aid might be a little bit different.
It is.
Because they might decide that if you're a district that's getting a lot of GEA, they might give you less in foundation aid.
Well, we
So
knew
it's
that
hard
that-
to predict it. So,
And
What formula they're going to use?
exactly.
Correct.
And Gallivan said it almost needs, my interpretation was it almost needs to happen that the GEA is wiped away first,
Yes.
and then they go back and look at the
'Cause they can't
foundation
do
aid.
it.
Because it
They don't know how much
Twist
money
the
they'll
formula,
take out of the
right.
budget.
Correct. So I have budgeted GEA gone, and I put in some additional foundation aid. And if those all come in, we're all good.
And
If they
it
don't
comes
come in,
over your conservative level.
then we're really
even
good.
better.
Then this model gets pushed out more years, and that's all good. So that can only help us out. So, all right, so moving forward, we talked about enrollment, and we showed the decline in enrollment, and I don't know, Sandy, if you want to touch enrollment or not, or do we do enough of
Yeah,
that on
I want
Saturday?
to back up for just a second, because
Sure.
we're really okay in time.
Or
So this
put it in
is,
the graphic, what's
this
the
is
date?
coming from the Council of School Superintendents Legal Advocate, Bob Lowry. He says where they stand, the Executive Senate and Assembly positions, he sent this out today,
I was going to say, I haven't heard
Yeah,
this
no,
yet.
you don't have it yet. It was supposed to come out yesterday. As reported elsewhere, the Assembly proposed school aid increase totaling $2.13 billion. You guys have gotten that, the board has.
Yes.
Maybe the BAT has not. And the Senate has proposed an increase totaling $1.655 billion. So right now, the Assembly is much higher than the Senate. Both houses would end the gap of elimination, or the GEA, in this coming state budget. The Assembly would increase foundation aid by $1.1 billion, and the Senate would increase it by $880 million. So the Senate is coming in consistently lower in all aid, okay? $1.1 billion for the Senate would increase the aid by $880 million and propose to phase in a permanent law formula by 1920. It is not easy.
That's when we go bankrupt.
Great, Paul. It's not easy to evaluate the differences in how the two houses would distribute their foundation aid, and that's what Jen was just saying. The governor recommends increasing foundation aid increase by $266 million. Part of the difference in the price tags for the Senate and the Assembly plans arise from their treatment of the governor's proposal for the community schools aid formula. This community schools aid formula of $100 million doesn't do anything for us.
No, our allotment is zero.
The state would eliminate the formula but provide as one of its components to the foundation aid an increase that no district would receive less in foundation aid than what it would have received under the governor's budget from the combination of foundation aid and community schools. The Assembly would double the governor's proposed community schools amount to $200 million and add some other restorative things. Both houses would increase aidable salary ceilings for BOCES aid from $30,000 to $34,000, which is pretty nominal. Career and Tech Ed, or CTE, does not restrict an increase to CTE programs, but authorizes increases. Both houses would fund other aid formulas. The Assembly rejects the linkage of eligibility to receive state aid increase with gaining approval for new teacher and principal evaluations, or APPR. Neither house proposes any moderation of the property tax cap, and the Senate would make it permanent and extend it to New York City. That's a huge one. Tom, can you talk about that?
Can you
very
repeat
quickly?
that last
I
part
was
again?
walking
What did
with
you
that. I
just
didn't
say?
hear
Neither house proposes any moderation of the property tax gap, so that's what we've all been talking about. But the Senate would make it permanent
Yes.
and extend it to New York City.
And what Senator Gallivan said, because really we want tax cap relief. We don't want to be stuck at a .93 or negative. So we kind of were trying to feel him out. Where do you think it's going? And pretty much he kind of echoed the same sentiment that, yes, we think it's going to be permanent, and yes, New York should be part of it, New York City. But still, does that change our rate?
No.
No, doesn't.
But he also did mention moving away from, making it more of a flat 2%, or straight 2% than.
See, I didn't cut that out of that he was
Yeah,
looking
I
at
thought
too.
this- Didn't it? Oh, Sandy's. I thought he alluded,
2% would be great. I mean,
Right.
if it is a flat 2, that'd be wonderful.
because he said no one could have predicted the
That's-
CPI.
that's
and
true. Yeah, he
that's
did
when I
talk about that.
rolled my
No
eyes
one predicted,
inappropriately,
we
but-
didn't either.
I don't know if
We
it's-
feel
But
like
I-
we keep trying to catch up. Yeah.
Exactly, but
Yeah.
I
then
hope.
he said maybe it should, I thought that's when he said there should be talk of.
Let's hope. Yeah, if I
A
missed
flat
it, then I
2%.
just missed
As
it.
it stands now, both houses are at least close to providing the total $1.7 billion aid increase that the Educational Conference Board estimated would be needed to allow school districts to maintain current services, which is what we're just talking about not doing,
Right.
right? The Senate at $1.655 billion, the Assembly at $1.9. Their total increase excluding the community schools aid and other smaller categorical initiatives. The smaller categorical initiatives are important to us, though, because that's where we're losing revenue.
Right. So
Okay.
we're losing students, so the amount of money we could
But a
backslide.
concern is that in negotiating a final budget with the governor, that they may negotiate down from the Senate's lower total. This would complicate achieving goals such as ending the GEA and providing adequate foundation aid for districts only minimally aided by GEA restorations. That's really that's big too.
So what we're actually going to see, and this is what's happened for several years now, that they're back to providing on-time budgets. And I think they're going to be the same this year. I'm not hearing anything they're going to be late this year, and as long as they're not, by March 31st, we will get the combined Senate Assembly, and that will tell us really a better picture if we're going to get more foundation aid and if the GEA is really gone. I expect
So the
GEA.
next time you as a board get
On the
together,
5th.
you will have that.
Correct, which we did last year. And that's where last
And
year we
that
said,
helped
okay,
us
we're
a
better.
lot. I remember that day.
Do I think the increase is going to be what last year was? No. we were 600-some thousand last
Right,
year.
yeah.
It's not going to be that high. We're going to see the 243 come back, I believe, which we've already figured in, and then whatever we see from foundation.
So we're hoping for 50.
Yeah, that's what I'm putting, 50.
What did you figure in?
50,000 for foundation aid.
It's better than nothing, but yeah. it's-
Correct. But you just don't know where they're going to go with the formula. I mean, when you take a look at GEA, if you take a look at different school districts, we're 245,000 more to go. We started like 375 this year. Other districts were almost 1 million, some were more. So
Right, yeah.
you just can't tell where they're going to go in the formula. So, okay. So now just taking a
Tom,
look.
if we go back to the
Enrollment?
enrollment there.
Absolutely. Which
Here's
one?
the scary part.
Yes.
Just one.
2019-20, and you look at your appropriations.
Yes. Yes.
Do you know what the cost is per student?
I didn't do a cost per student. If I would.
It's north of 25.
Yep.
So if you look at where we're right now, roughly 19 per student,
Yeah.
to 25, that's a 30% increase
In spending.
in spending
student.
between now and 2019.
So let's talk about that for a moment, because we talked about
a
that
good
a
point.
couple of months ago. The fewer students we have, the more expensive it becomes to educate every single child. So a beautiful example is, I can run a class of, let's give it a number of 20, or I can run a class of 12. Well, in a district like ours, especially at the upper levels here, where you have a German 4, a Spanish 4, a fifth sequence perhaps in FACS or something else, you're going to take those kids out of that program because there's only 8 of them. So it becomes more expensive to run that class per child than it would if you had 20 kids. So the bigger school districts are not going to feel this at all. They just aren't. Whereas us, we will. Now you head a little 6 miles south of us, where they get more state aid coming back in the next couple of years, they're going to be feeling better than we are. We are just that wicked stepchild, so to speak. That's the wrong term.
We're a little less than 50% of our
Exactly. So
spending
we're
from
not
state source.
affluent. We don't have the businesses to kick in on the taxes, which means that all of you as homeowners pay it, but yet we're not going to get the extras back.
But it's a great point. At what point is it too much per student? And I don't know that.
I mean, I'm just looking at the percentage increase. I mean,
Yes.
even if you were able to generate the revenue, to generate an extra 30%, I mean, and most businesses right now aren't asking their sales guys to go out and generate.
30%.
Do you know who's feeling that? Is if you watch West Valley. So my oldest stepdaughter will be 40 this year. When she was 8, the conversations in West Valley started about merging with other districts, Elkinville, Springville, whoever that might be. So that was 32 years ago. And they have hung on. But they are exploded in what their cost per child is. This is the first year where they're actually seriously looking at merging. So, but their cost per child is enormous. They're a beautiful one to watch, because they're just not getting anything anymore either. They don't even have the people, much less the kids. We might not have kids, but we still have people living here.
And Jack,
Look at that.
I would say is that's why I would never want to be a board member. Even in my role as a non-board member. But it's true. They have a hard job. They have a hard job. This is not fun doing this part, but as a board member, and you guys need to adopt this, I think that is the hardest thing to do. And sorry, I'm not trying to dissuade you in any way, shape, or form, but it's going to get harder as your years go on. So, we'll be fine. We will make it through this year. We're going to. I mean, it's not a question whether or not we're going to make it through. We'll definitely make it through. It's what do we do to do business differently to continue to make it through as the years go on.
When I look at a model, it's not 1920. Maybe it's 2023, right? So it's just farther down the line. It's not like it's not ever going to be. If the state doesn't do something different, it's just down the road.
But because there's so many districts already in stress, and because there's so many districts that will get there,
Yes.
there is going to have to be something done. They can't. I mean, this governor, does want certain things to happen, but on the same sense, Jen and I talked about this. We really need to energize as many people as we can to get involved at even the town level, getting them to the town meetings and getting some of
Yes.
these, like I sent out in the text, the planning board and the zoning board the ones that are hampering any kind of expansion, you know, because they don't understand that people aren't having, like Mr. Sturm that just passed away, 11 kids, you know?
And it's got to stop with the comment if we don't want Eden to get big.
Eden will
No.
never get big.
It's and I
not,
like
but
what you
have
did
to-
at the forum. Eden is changing, and it's not changing getting big, it is shrinking incredibly.
Like
But-
geometrically.
But I also pulled from all the component districts that we feel, and every school district.
Feels the same.
Iroquois,
Yeah.
they're losing 30 kids per class. Orchard Park is losing 20 to 30 kids per class.
Now, projections, though, state that the boomettes, right, I'm a baby boomer, and we have kids, they're the boomettes, are having their kids between 6 to 10 years later than what our generation would have. Those kids are now starting to come in. So the projections by the statisticians is in the next 6 years, you will start to see an increase. That's why we kept JLP. So we believe that. We don't believe that Eden's going to get smaller, 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 smaller.
I mean, looking at North Collins, and maybe they get more financial aid, but I mean, they're running about around 500 students, 550 students. I mean, and their enrollment's going down as well. I mean,
But they
how can
actually
they
have
cost
more-
justify, I mean, staying in business? And it's not just North Collins, it's other school districts, like I say, getting smaller, but
But they actually have more industry than we do. If you look at what's down there,
And they, yes. and
they actually have more industry and more businesses that contribute to their tax
And they have less.
than we do.
They have less exempted land. So I don't know if we are. They have less than we do. I think we're close to 60. The other difference too is that North Collins has always operated as a small school. When North Collins looks around and compares itself, it compares itself to Gowanda, Pine Valley, Forestville.
Oh, man, I don't know how
Okay.
they're still there.
When Eden looks around, who do we compare ourselves to?
Hamburg, East
Hamburg,
Aurora,
East
East
Aurora,
Aurora,
Orchard Park.
Yeah.
Okay? We're that in the middle piece, okay? So we're rejecting this concept of being a small school. North Collins doesn't offer the enriched programs that we offer. They like what we offer, and they have the money to come in and get some of what we have, but they don't offer it. Okay? They don't offer the AP courses, the ECC courses, they just don't do it.
And I also see, and I'll say when it's my personal opinion, I do truly believe what we're seeing going on right now is a game of musical chairs by the state. I think what you're seeing going on is more and more districts become in fiscal stress. And again, at some point, there will be a tipping point. And I think at some point, the governor is going to pull the one chair and say, okay, now we're done.
Okay,
And
we're
who-
done weighing what?
Anyone still left standing with savings and reserves, you're still able,
Oh, I
we're
agree.
not going to be taking you over, we're not going to do anything. At some point, he is going to, I believe, make a move to change the way school districts look like. And those who have no savings and who are in a deficit are in trouble. Those who still do they found a seat. Those who have no savings, they have not found a seat. And so if we can
That's your
keep pushing it
control
out,
board. That's your control board.
right. And I think at some point, I don't know what year that is, I do think at some point that's where, in the state, that's where we're actually headed.
Well, it's when he gets the number he wants of
Correct.
districts.
I agree.
And that's not something that too many people know.
You're right.
And he has, that's why we have to report so much data. That's why by March 1st, we have to commit
Correct.
ourselves, even though we haven't gotten funding.
By design.
About what we're going to do,
Yep.
because he wants to see where everybody is and how far they're pushing it.
You know, Paul,
It's
it's
more of
not-
a cat and mouse game
Of
than
course.
musical chairs.
Yeah.
Or a lion. It's not how many districts, it's the size. He is a proponent of larger districts. So, for example, let's take the Cheektowaga schools. They each have their own superintendent. They each have their board of education. He wants them to operate like Williamsville, with 11,000 children and one board of ed. He wants New York State to operate the way Virginia does, by county.
County.
So where David O'Rourke is our district superintendent for Erie 2, that's how Virginia operates, right?
He would be the superintendent for
Exactly,
the
of all
district.
the schools.
He's looking at a
That's right.
BOCES-style system,
Yes.
where BOCES
Right.
2 would control our district
Yes.
and have one board, and
Yes.
and so he's looking for consolidation. I mean, he's not just in school
Not
districts,
wrong.
too. I mean, he's
You're right.
looking at
The
shared
towns,
service
yeah,
for
yeah.
governments, he's looking
Yeah.
at...
Absolutely.
He would suggest to us that maybe we are the transportation hub to Lakeshore, to Gowanda, to East Eden, to maybe Hamburg. Maybe Hamburg is. But what's causing him trouble is the North Country, where everybody's so far away. He doesn't know how to do that.
No, you can't do that.
He
It's
doesn't know how
tough.
to do that.
Well, it's also causing him trouble that the communities are really turf-oriented, that they don't want to give up the districts.
They
Even
tried with the
ones-
carrot before, and that
Yeah,
didn't work.
Even the ones that are in financial stress, when they go out to their
Mm-hmm.
voters for mergers, we've seen
Again and
majority of
again
them
down.
go down.
Yep.
Why would North Collins close? They're not in fiscal stress. They would have nothing left in their town. Why would they do that?
But if their control board put in place for a school district, I don't think the population would have a vote.
No, no.
Yeah, if they went
That's
there, you're right.
That's
The
where he
basically
wants to
state would
get.
mandate consolidation at that
But
point.
that's where he wants to
Yep.
get.
That's
Yeah.
what he wants to do.
So that he can come in and say, okay, I can fix this problem, and this is how I'm going to do it.
All right, so let's go back to the handout there. So after the enrollment, for the budget recap for last year. So this current year. So the budget that we're in right now,
What page are you on?
right after the enrollment, there were a couple slides for enrollment, the very next one. Next
So-
page. Oh, you want to talk?
Yeah,
We're still in
I
enrollment.
would come, as a bad team, I would come back to this page. Okay? Because what I would ask you to consider is, what do you believe is a guideline that you can endorse moving forward at any grade level? So if we stay at K1 and 2, you can see that it's 19, 20, and 21. Okay. But if in fact Eden does start to grow, what is that number to you? Because we at Eden have been at 23 at K1 and 2. What do you believe in? When you come into elementary school, and I would suggest looking at 3, 4, and 5 as elementary, because we're moving toward a middle school, what do you believe is a good number? Because research will tell you that a smaller class size is valuable, but that smaller class size is anywhere from 15 to 18. Above that, they don't see that big of a difference when you go to 19, 21, or 22. In the elementary schools, our students with special needs are co-taught, and they're not necessarily, and next year they will most all be in one class together, so it's not like they're scattered about, which in the bigger school you might see. When you get to the middle school, 6, 7, and 8, remembering that in 6, 7, and 8 in the middle school, what we're shooting for is a middle school for model schools, a middle school with a theme like a STEAM school, a middle school perhaps that's teamed, right, STEAM or STEM. What are the numbers? What do they look like? Because as the district starts to grow, you have to know what that is. And if the board adopts a new policy for non-resident tuition, I'm going to be asking you what your recommended totals are for 7 through 12. Currently, we can go anywhere from 20 to 27, 20 to 29. But if we can bring kids in here, 7th and 8th grade might be a solid 27. Are you comfortable with that? Because that's going to make the difference in your policy for non-resident tuition. Okay. So that's all I wanted to say on this one. You have to know what you feel comfortable with. I would suggest to you that some of our upper level classes, our 11th and 12th grade classes of APs, so let's suggest that 33 kids go out for an AP government class. I'm not going to have a class of 33, so what do? I split it. So now I have a class of 16. So kids are coming out of this district, this goes back to what Don was saying, kids are coming out of this district in an AP government class with a class of 16, high rigor, but small class, and they're jumping into college.
Oh, yeah.
Okay? That's me coming out of Springville and going to UB where there were 80 kids in my chem lab, 400 kids in my physics lab. I didn't know what to do. I had no idea what to do. So we don't necessarily always do them a service by having a class of 16. And I've had this conversation with science lab teachers for 3 years now. Having a lab of 16 isn't necessarily good. Teach me in a controlled environment how to be in a class of 29, because I'm going to college next year and I'm going to be in a class that's bigger. So you just have to know in your heart what it is you believe in. Okay, now you can.
Okay.
Thanks.
So last year, when we took a look at our spending, it was 26,994 is where we're at right now. Our increase was $597,000. That was a spending increase of 2.26% over the previous year. And obviously, as we see as it tightens, can we still sustain that as years go on? The tax levy, though, only went up 2.21. Again, what taxpayer increase
That's an
was last year.
overspending model.
It's an overspending model because even what the state went up wasn't enough to fully cover everything. So we're still in a deficit. Even though CPI was 1.62 with their exclusions, 2% is not 2%, 1.62 wasn't 1.62. Never is.
This
Beat
year
that
it's
to death.
0.12.
Well, no, it's 0.93.
It started at 0.12 until you did all the
That,
formulas.
that was the growth model, correct. 0.12 was the CPI. And then with we had a town growth model and then the CPI.
Okay.
And I don't want to say
And
that
that's
back.
how
I might
we
have said
went
that
from
backwards.
1.62 to 2.21.
Yes.
Okay, so this year, the CPI is really, don't let me say
I'm either
wrong.
saying it backwards. So we had a town growth model and the CPI model. One was 0.83, which I think it was
we're
CPI.
0.12.
Well, I think that was our growth factor, our town growth factor.
Okay, okay.
And I think the CPI was
Oh,
0.83.
no, that
I could
makes
have,
sense to me.
I don't want to reverse it.
No, that
But I
makes
believe it
perfect
was
sense.
it.
The town growth factor being 0.83, which got us to
Would be-
0.93.
No, I think it was town growth 0.12 and then the CPI point.
0.83.
Yeah, something real close to that.
Doesn't matter.
Yep.
Okay.
Overall total, 0.93 is what it was. So when we take a look at the revenues, really when you run through that formula of the whole growth, and what we've now done is we've consolidated, it was in our first presentation. Our tax levy last year, this current year, 13,571. Our tax levy for next year, 13,697. The increase is 126,000. That's how much the taxes are going up. Again, 0.93%. Our overall revenues, though, are actually going down 0.54% overall.
Because,
Based off of last year, we overestimated our revenues. So we're actually going down from our budget last year. Our spending, on the other hand, last year we were at 26,994. Currently, the proposal is 27,669, an increase of $572,000, or an increase of 2.12.
which would have been fine in last year's numbers.
Last year's numbers, you would have been fine. You'd be in a much better spot. If your overall revenues, well, let me rephrase it. If your overall revenues would have gone up at the same rate, but they
our
didn't.
revenues are going to continue to grow.
Our revenues are flat, basically.
Yes.
Now, we talked last time, Sandy, I'm going to let you take the next two slides. We
So this
did
is
on
not
community
new
forum.
from Saturday's community forum, but I know that some of you weren't able to attend because you're building houses or working or so. So we wanted to make sure that we kept it the same. This is what went up on the board on Saturday. What we know that we need to do differently just to be able to move forward. A new mobile device management system, or an MDM. This would allow us to utilize push-in models with our technology so that we don't have to have each of our technology people with their hands on any of our devices, especially as we move forward to a one-to-one model. The new BOCES Shared District Data Coordinator, there's a reason for this one. This person comes in, works with us on the data, works with our teachers on the data, but farther on down, we're also suggesting that our current tech integrator go back into the classroom. So that's pretty much a little bit of both. The new BOCES E-rate, which is a wonderful opportunity for us to get a great rate on anything technology. That social emotional or health and wellness, the social worker increase from 4 to 5 days. It actually was a 1.17 increase. It's a recommended increase to begin with, but we're settling in on just one extra day. The .17 technology teacher allows us to offer either 2 20-week courses or 1 40-week course. This is funded in part by Senator Gallivan, but also because we're not sending one student to P-TECH this year, which is a $19,000 cost. When you send a student to P-TECH, you're not committing 19,000, you're actually committing 19,000 times 4 years. So by not sending one this year, it's almost an $80,000 increase. I love the P-TECH program, but if we could do something like that here and service 20 to 40 kids, I think the situation that we're in makes more sense.
And it's not actually-
Is there a kid from P-TECH that's not going next year, or he's...
It's,
We have
right.
2 that started last year that will
Continue.
continue to go.
It's not a
Add
new.
one.
It's not an additional.
Planned loss of a 4th grade class in the associated specials. It is completely due to enrollment. It is not due to budget. You would have seen that up there no matter what. We're going from 102 or 3 to 88, I think. The increased academic intervention services, the elementary school has squeaked by this year. It was in September that Mark actually came to me and said, we have a problem. Because you don't have these numbers either until summer. We have a problem. But we didn't have it in the budget to increase it, so he does some things differently, but that's on the table for now. In terms of reductions, it's a freezing of the supplies again. Remember, we froze them last year, we had a reduction in them last year. So we're really going to see this year, that planned P-TECH slot. This is the NYSBA conferences for the board. Maybe 1 or 2 of you could go to the one in Buffalo, but all 7, probably not. The BOCES Risk Management Service, this is something that we have had in our budget. We're taking it out. It's a behind the scenes more. The .17 fax teacher. This is an interesting one because last year we planned for 4 food preps based on the student requests, because everything at the high school that's not mandated is based on student requests. And so there were 4 sections, 4 20-week sections. In the end result, the numbers of kids that actually took the course were in the teens, somewhere between 12 and 16. So the recommended, based on the trend from this year, was to reduce one of those, 2 of the 20-week sections in fax. Now the student requests come out this week, and they're back up in the 50s. So it's hard to say what's going to happen to the kids, okay? A loss of a 6th grade class, or you as a board could say, Sandy, why aren't you saying 5th, okay? But a loss of a 5th or a 6th grade class in associated specials. This again goes back to you as a board, understanding what you believe in your heart about class guidelines. This class would end up somewhere between 25 and 26 students, could go to 27 if in fact a number of students moved in. A computer teacher loss of .47 that currently teaches K-2 computer. Those computer classes would be picked up by our current business teachers. A .50 FTE in strings. Basically, I do believe that at the 2-minute session today that you will see or hear some of the parents and some of the music teachers talk about this. What I handed the board before when you walked in was a chart that shows you the current percentage of usage within music so that you can make a good decision about what you want to do with that. It's not a loss in program, it's a change in the way we deliver it. So rather than the high school teacher teaching 612, that teacher would be strings, that teacher would be responsible for 412 in strings. Most likely start the day there, do the ensemble, do the lessons, and then come here. Where the squeeze comes is in the schedule up here. So Jeff just starts to have hives when we talk about this. It's not that they need to do it differently. I would say to you, though, very boldly, the days of one-to-one instrument lessons are no more. And that's a hard thing for people to get used to. Many of us in our age did have those. But we don't have one-on-one reading instruction. We don't have one-on-one speech in many cases. The IT planned expenditure decrease, we're going to take a look at our Spark Fund money differently. And then just recently, within the past month, we had an increase of .17 of a special ed teacher that comes back down to 0.5.
Okay, so where does that put us? The spending versus the revenues. So really right now, as of today, and this is just in the budget plan and the spending plan, so you guys adopt the budget plan. So as of today, we're at 27,566,185 with the spending and 26,053 with the revenue. The difference at this point is $1,513,000 deficit. Okay, so that's where we're at currently, which you saw on the slide previously when I showed you the reality several slides back. So what can we actually do? Well, first of all, I want to show you the difference between Saturday and where we're at today. Saturday, we're at 1616. in the hole. So it's a little bit better, not much, but a little bit better. We still have, on Saturday, we still had $39,542 to take out for supplies. And we had advocated on Saturday at that point, what was put up there to close the gap to $243,000 for the GEA. That's what I said, we had planned that coming back. And without any other changes, that then would fall on using fund balance and reserves of $1,253,183. And again, you saw, again, if you're using the reserves, where that would go. As of today, what we're looking at is $1,513,000 in deficit. We still have, there's still some administrators who are reducing their supply lines. We still have $17,244 still to come out of that line for all supplies. The GEA still have $243,000. The fund balance reserves changes ever so slightly of $1,253,000. So it's virtually unchanged at this point. Now, again, one of the things that we pointed out Saturday, and for me to point out again today, is what we did last year with the fund balance and reserves versus what we're doing, or what's up there at this point for fund balance and reserves. So last year, we started out saying, let's use $1.1 million in fund balance and reserves to close the gap. On 3/31, the state came back. We had a good year last year. We got back $616,000. From there, we actually ended up taking out of fund balance and reserves $687,000. So we
We
didn't.
were able to put a bulk toward the technology.
And we also had technology, and we also had some other, there were music increases, there were a couple other increases as well. But our fund balance and reserve use went from 1.1 down to 687. So that 687 last year, what we're saying now is, given all the parameters, unless we change anything, that would grow to $1,252,000. Yes.
Do you have a projection on how much we're going to be able to put in that reserve at the end of this year?
Not yet. I will probably about another month,
But
because
you know you're not at 4% though.
we're not at 4%. Our unappropriated fund balance, which is usually you want to keep around the 4%, we've already used with our deficit last year. We're at 3% right now. So for any money that we have left over this year, you'd want to bring that back up to 4 if you can.
And what I would suggest, and David, I don't mean to put you in the spot because you don't know I'm going to say this, but if I'm wrong, please correct me. We're also at a crunch time right before the capital project where things are starting to break down. So every week, somebody's in Tom's office saying, we got to look at this, we've got to look at this, we've got to look
Every
at
week?
this. Every day, sorry. Every day. Would you agree?
There is one today, as a matter of fact.
I don't know about it.
No, you don't.
Okay.
Not yet, anyway. We haven't had a chance to talk.
Buildings are aging and things are just breaking. It's a natural thing. Just like our bodies, they fall apart.
And so, again, whereas at the end of the year, we've had 2 million a couple years ago, then 1 million, and then this year, we're definitely going to be under 1 million. I mean, because that keeps closing and that keeps closing.
Right, keep,
And what we did in the budget process for next year, what was asked for, is for us to go through all the lines and see where we've had any areas where, if we have an unexpected thing happen, take a look at those and try and decrease those. We did. We went through every line, and we looked through anything that says, if you have an emergency, and we decrease those. So we are very tight for next year's budget.
right, so that makes the money at the end of the year that we put in
Even
reserves less. Because
Not this June, the following June, it'll
I
be much
understand,
less. Correct. So looking at this, of going from 687 to 1,252, again, I think my opinion as Director of Finance, not personally, but as Director of Finance, I would not advocate that. It's not a good path for the district to go on. However, that being said, if you go to the next slide, if we can reverse that a little and stop the growth, that's what we want to do. So at this point, if we can lower our dependence on the reserves of 1,252, we met this week, because we've really been pressing our insurance company to say,
Normally, they'll talk to us in May, so you did press.
we did press, and they went from about 9% down to just under 5%. So it's a savings we're going to be looking at of about $150,000.
So the savings is in the projected increase, not in the
Correct.
savings.
Well, we're not saving money, we're just spending less.
Right, yeah.
We're still spending more, just not as much more as what we thought we would
projected.
spend. Correct. So it'll be $150,000 less than what we thought would be more. How's that for clear? We had in our budget $47,000 for iPads. We can actually look at some of our smart schools money for that, the allocation that all the voters passed out in November 2 years ago.
And interestingly enough, I think what we're going to find is more and more schools are in the same situation as we are, and are actually looking at the smart schools money for hardware that originally everybody was saying they wouldn't do. So I think we're seeing more of that occur.
Additional foundation aid, 50,000.
Right.
It's in there, whether or not we actually received it or not, but we're hopeful.
But that's very conservative, hopefully.
I honestly, I don't know if it is or not, because I don't know on the formula. I can't say it's conservative, I can't say it's aggressive. I have no idea, honestly, Paul, what they're going to do. I put a number in hopes. I have absolutely no idea how they're going to work that formula, if it's going to benefit downstate more than upstate. I have no idea what they're going to do with that. None. So I'd love to say it's conservative, but I can't even say that.
Right, I understand that.
And then we looked at areas of additional staff savings.
So let me jump in for a minute. So what came in this past week were all the student requests. So just so that there are some people who may not understand how the scheduling at the high school works, but other than core area, like kids know they have to take social studies 9, social studies 10, social studies 11, there are some things that they have, a lot of things actually, that they have as requests or interests that they want to take. So all electives, for the most part, are things that they might want to take, things that they're projected out as sequences, AP classes, ECC classes, and ECC Health that Kathy added last year. We every year take a look at CPR, AED, lifeguarding, all of those, to see what the kids' numbers look like who's asking to say something. So what I gave the board, not the entire bat, but what I gave the board were some numbers that came out of that, and that Jeff then took with the counselors to look at to see, well, what does this actually mean? It is completely a draft. It is a first blush. There is nothing in here guaranteed. Everything depends on scheduling, because whenever you try to create a schedule, you have singletons that get in the way. And so the more singletons, the more cuts, the less you offer, the harder it is to make a big schedule. You can remember that if you were trying to take classes at a college that you wanted to take two things that were offered at the same time. Well, we can't offer them at the same time, because when we offer them at the same time, then those 15 kids that wanted it don't get it. So then it becomes even more complicated to take a look at. And when you add a 7th and 8th grade on top of it, and you add sharing of teachers traveling, now it just becomes even more complicated than you had before. So in looking, though, in a first blush, what we see is an opening of a .17, which is a 45-minute class or a 40-minute class at the high school in our business department. Basically, what we were recommending last week is that we would bump up our current JLP librarian to pick up grades K and half of 1 to teach computers, but it's very possible that our existing business staff could do it. What it looks like, I can't tell you. Who ends up in what building, I don't know. And that's where the administrators and the principals will get together with these teachers and say what makes sense. Just because a teacher's teaching at the high school now doesn't mean that they won't move. You know, it's just going to be what makes sense. So that's actually a savings of about $16,000 because our current teachers can pick it up rather than doing an addition to the librarian at GLP. We also found a hole in the art department of a .17 where there was a course that only had 2 kids that requested it. Now that could go up to 5 or 6. But when you start to think that a section of a teacher, if it's an experienced teacher, could be worth about $16,000 to us with or without benefits.
It would be with benefits.
With benefits, 2 kids taking a course is an $8,000 course. That's a big commitment. So we have to really believe in that course. So right now we have the possibility of 1 art section opening. Again, that would mean that the low seniority teacher would be reduced by another .17. That's about a $13,700 savings.
I just want to point out with benefits, we always pay benefits on FICA and ERS or TRS.
So we included it.
The only thing that doesn't, if we reduce a teacher, the healthcare remains the same.
If
so
they
that
were
part doesn't change.
full-time.
If they were full-time and then they go down.
Right, if they
that
were
part doesn't
part-time,
change.
then
Correct,
no.
correct.
We talked about the health insurance of $150,000. We talked about the possibility of using the Smart Schools bond. That's something new. The foundation aid we talked about, $50,000. Those all add up to the savings of $276,770, or that staff savings of $29,770.
So when you take a look at the 1,252,000, which is on there Saturday, I think it was 1,253 on Saturday, but now it's 1,252, and once you reduce that 276, it brings the net reserve use to 976. You're under $1 million.
If the board accepts
If the-
all the recommendations that have been
This
given them.
this is only a draft. It is the board's.
Okay, this is yours.
Correct. And I would end with this. And I said this on Saturday, and I really want to again reiterate, this saying is not taken lightly. Change by the inch is a cinch, change by the yard is hard. But fortunately, as our district, Raiders respond. We've always risen to the challenge, so.
But let's do some discussion.
Yep. So,
Thoughts?
I missed the last little bit.
Sure.
I was talking with the one section of your step 25 around 16,000.
So let's take a secondary teacher, okay? If you take a brand-new teacher with benefits, they're about 67,000. They teach 6 courses, so if you divide that number by 6, you can figure out how much a section tends to cost. If you take a more expensive teacher, then you just bump that up more. So what we do is we take a look at who's likely to be teaching the course, right? We don't know in some cases. And in this case, with these recommendations, it could be that the business teachers decide to switch up who's in what building. And I'm not going to be the one that makes a recommendation. So it could be anywhere from 67,000 as a brand-new first teacher with benefits up to whatever the scale would be.
I didn't know what I missed. And I wasn't sure if this is bad team information, the band work, I didn't know.
I can
what I'm
create that for
supposed
the
to look at or
bad.
not.
No, I told them I don't have a problem with you looking at that. That's the chart. That's the chart that we made up of band, orchestra, and chorus with some numbers.
But the other stuff I shouldn't be looking at, you're just telling
What
us
other stuff?
the other
So like
possible.
this page?
the board, the superintendent memo to the board.
Yeah, but that's okay, I'm just trying
Yep.
to do.
No, I don't
Yep.
have that for you to see, but thank you. But that is what we've come up with since yesterday.
Comments, particularly BAT members, because I know the board will be talking obviously during the board meeting, but comments, thoughts?
First, thank you for giving us the shout out to be politically active. So my piece will be.
We want to do a rally in the fall, Kathy.
That it really has to happen. And Mr. Bronscheitel, who's not here today, but spoke very eloquently on Saturday
Yes, he did.
morning, said we've got to get something bigger, so to speak, rolling. And any way that we could figure out to, it's very precarious. We can't have departments in K through 12 against one another.
Right.
So you can't involve students, but somehow you got to get the parents to participate in what you're asking
Well, you can
for.
involve your students, you just can't do it during instructional
No,
time.
but where I'm going with that is, in the end, you're gonna be listening to the parents, what programs they want. That's, you've said that a few times. But how do we open up doors and windows to get the parents, because most parents aren't reacting until it's cut, until it's gone.
Absolutely.
So how else do we publicize, get politically active? And we've had our other intense issues in the district where the cafeteria was filled with hundreds of people, if anyone remembers semestering process. And I think it can happen politically speaking. I think there's parents that are very much involved. And I don't know that it will be pleasant, but at least the parents would feel as though they knew what was on the table before.
So let me give you a suggestion in the shared decision-making team meeting that I just came from and you came from. A recommendation that I made was for the shared decision-making team to be the overriding body to help this district move forward in the next 4 years to understand what it becomes. What programs does it offer? What does it believe in? What are the primary focuses? And then help us do that communication out. And it gives that shared decision-making team a focus too, to work with their own constituent buildings.
Just to thank you and encouraging people. We didn't have this big, very big crowd.
You might
Get
now, though.
politically active.
Well, my personal, since Saturday, when I left Tom's very uplifting meeting.
It's not Tom's meeting.
It's not Tom's fault. And I have to have some more discussion with Sandy and other members of the board, but I think there's something that we could do on a very global level. I don't think we have to address it from a, well, this is being cut specifically, this is being, I think we can look at it as budgeting as a whole and the future not only of this school district, but quite frankly, the community. It's not just, I mean, yes, it's impacting my child, but it's an impact on the community, and I think I have ideas swimming in my head of how we can put it out there, but I think if we address it from a global standpoint and try to really bring all aspects of this community together, I don't think it will be as contentious as I think perceiving it could be.
I think that it needs to be directed more globally, like you said. It's not us here that it needs to be addressed to, because we're the ones that are struggling with these cuts, and the only reason we're doing is because we have to. I think it needs to be addressed to the people that can control more of the funding and stuff. We can't cause people to move into this community. You know, we can tell them how nice this community is, how good the school is, how beautiful our facilities are, and we can't cause individually the government to increase our funding. But if we get together and really send a message to the people that are hampering growth in this community, that are hampering, you know, getting our money back, like when we go to the senators and...
I didn't mean to imply it would have to be contentious.
No, but I know what you're saying, like,
All I really was trying to say.
Can you speak into the microphone? Thanks.
I was misunderstood at another meeting, so I've learned to be careful, very careful. I would like, through however, the PTA, that as many parents as possible and community members are fully aware of as we move forward with all of the transitions. And I hope it's a real pleasant, positive process, because I think people have a lot, I think parents have a lot of real genuine knowledge and concerns for what they want for their young children. So I didn't mean to predict it
no,
in a
but I
negative
think the
way.
potential is there. I think you hit the nail on the head in saying a lot of people think everything's okay until what they love about the school is gone or on the verge of being gone. And I think we need to unite people long before that happens so that we collectively can, I mean, some of the conversation we had has been my fear for a long time. I think the reality is we could really be facing state takeover, and that's frightening to me. I mean, that's a complete loss of control by this entire community about where education goes in this community if they come in, and that's a very frightening situation for me.
And I agree, we have to get after the politicians, so I'm thanking you for reaching out to people, educating people about how, making it easy, giving people links. Anytime I get a PTA, PTA email, I hit them all. When I get one of yours.
And just, and I'm sorry, I just need to wrap up because we have about 1 minute.
Okay.
And we did say at the beginning of the process this year and every year that when we look at closing a deficit, there are going to be things we talk about which are no fun. And they're not. There are tough choices, and I don't care which direction you look at. They're all tough choices. The days are gone that we have surpluses or that we don't have to make tough choices. And we said we can either handle it by all coming together, or we can fight each other for program preservation, either way. And as I said, in years past, we've all come together to try to find the best way to preserve as much as possible. Doesn't mean everything's going to be preserved. It can't. I mean, so that's the tough part. And I think everyone here knows that, realizes that, and wishes we weren't in that spot, but we have no choice because we are in that spot. So we'll have more discussion. The board meeting is starting momentarily, so for the BAT meeting, there you go, and then we'll break out, and then we'll move to the board meeting.